The New York Giants have done the unthinkable. They've leaked the draft interview tapes with Shedeur Sanders. Yes, those tapes. The ones that supposedly tanked his draft stock. The ones every analyst and media personality dissected without ever having actually seen them. The ones that sparked one of the messiest, most divisive narratives of the entire NFL draft cycle. Now, they're public, and let me tell you, what's on those tapes is not what people expected. Fans are in shock. Media heads are scrambling. And Shedeur? Well, he might be owed the biggest apology of the year. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Let's get into it. Let's rewind the clock for a second. Remember the pre-draft chatter? Shedeur Sanders, coming out of Colorado, had just put up one of the most efficient quarterback seasons in college football. A 74% completion rate, a calm, surgical presence in the pocket, a proven leader under pressure. He was calm in chaos, unshaken in tough matchups, a locker room general. But then came the whispers. The New York Giants had a sit-down interview with him during their pre-draft evaluations. And according to sources, you know the kind. Things went sideways, fast. He was defensive. He didn't take criticism well. He questioned the team's fit. Colin Cowherd even went on air saying it was one of the worst interviews he'd ever heard about. A massive red flag. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Forget the stats. Forget the wins. Forget the arm talent. Shedeur Sanders, a player, was no longer the topic. It was Shedeur Sanders, the personality, the ego, the attitude. That single interview allegedly sent him tumbling out of early round projections and into fifth-round obscurity. Teams backed off. Media outlets questioned his maturity. Critics said he should have stayed in school. Some even accused him of being a spoiled coach's kid who couldn't take tough questions. All of it based on an interview no one saw. Until now, because the Giants, in a move no one saw coming, just dropped the tape. And the fallout? Let's just say this is a receipts moment. So what's actually on the tape? Is it bad? Does Shedeur melt down? Snap at coaches? Storm out? Show diva energy? Nope. In fact, it's the opposite. What you see is a young quarterback sitting across from a high-pressure, old-school panel, calmly navigating a grilling session designed to push his buttons. He's not angry. He's not arrogant. He's just honest. At one point, the Giants asked him why he believes he's a fit for their team, and Shedeur pauses, thinks, and says, quote, "I'm not sure I am, honestly. Not because of your team, but because I don't want to waste your time or mine pretending we're a perfect match. I'm here to compete, to lead, and to win. If that's what you're looking for, then yeah, we're a fit. But if this is about politics or ego or who's supposed to wait their turn, maybe I'm not." Mic drop. That's it. That was the red flag. Not a meltdown. Not disrespect. Just a young man being transparent in a process that's usually drenched in fake smiles and prescripted answers. And now, everyone's seeing it, and everyone's reevaluating. Because here's the thing, Shedeur wasn't wrong. That kind of honesty scares people, especially in a league built on hierarchy and control. Teams want confidence, but not too much. Swagger, but only if it's quiet. They want rookies to show hunger, but still stay submissive. Shedeur didn't play that game. He spoke like someone who knew his worth, knew the politics, knew the risk of saying something real in a world obsessed with image. And for that, he got dinged. But now that the footage is out, the critics are backpedaling so fast they're burning turf. Even Cowherd, who once tore Shedeur apart for that interview, is now awkwardly pivoting to praise after watching the Browns' OTAs and now, this tape. He's mature. He's poised. Maybe we judge him too quickly. He says, "Gee, you think?" But let's not forget what this moment really exposes. How broken parts of the draft process still are. Because while we all talk about 40-yard dashes and combined scores, what gets buried are the off-the-record whispers, the narratives, the ego bruises behind closed doors. All it takes is one anonymous exec to spin a story, and suddenly a player's value changes. Not because of talent, but because of perception. That's what happened here. Shedeur Sanders didn't fall because he lacked ability. He fell because someone didn't like how confident he was. Someone didn't appreciate that he didn't toe the line. Someone decided he was too much for their system, and then they weaponized the media to make it stick. Until now, because this leak, it changes the whole game. It's not just about Shedeur anymore. It's about every player who's been misrepresented behind closed doors. It's about the calls for transparency in a process where billion-dollar decisions are made based on selective impressions. The Giants didn't have to release this tape, but by doing so, they've cracked open a conversation way bigger than one quarterback. And let's be honest, they probably didn't do it for the sake of justice. Maybe there was pressure. Maybe public speculation forced their hand. Maybe they wanted to clear their own name after it became clear Shedeur's success in Cleveland wasn't a fluke. Whatever the reason, it's out. And now the NFL has to face the music. Because if teams can tank a player's reputation over interpretation, then it's time to change the system. Meanwhile, Shedeur, he's not even sweating it. He's too busy lighting up Brown's camp, too busy earning first-team reps, too busy proving that what you saw in college wasn't a fluke. It was a preview. He's not the loudest guy in the room. But when he talks, people listen. And now, with the interview tape out, everyone is finally hearing the truth. This wasn't a diva moment. It was a man moment. A rare flash of honesty in a draft world built on sanitized rehearsals. And it's time to stop penalizing that. So what happens now? Well, for one, Shedeur's stock just skyrocketed. Not in draft terms, of course. He's already been picked. But in credibility, in respect, in leverage. Because if the Browns end up with a franchise QB from the 5th round because other teams couldn't handle confidence, that's a franchise-shifting flex. Other front offices are going to start asking harder questions about their own processes, about who they passed on, about how they evaluate leadership versus compliance. And for fans, this is a moment of clarity. You saw the media storm. You saw the critics pile on. And now you see the truth. It's not just about what gets said. It's about who controls the narrative. And this time, Shedeur Sanders just took the narrative back. So now that the tape is out and the truth is visible, let's talk about what this actually means. Not just for Shedeur Sanders, but for every single person who ever had their name dragged to the mud in the draft process for daring to speak honestly. Because this wasn't just about an interview gone wrong. It was about the weaponization of perception. Shedeur didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He didn't insult anyone. He just told the truth. Gave an answer that wasn't sanitized. Didn't put on the mask. And what did he get in return? A media pylon. Articles. Segments. Hot takes. All claiming he had attitude issues. That he was too selective, not coachable, or, my personal favorite, entitled. As if confidence in your own abilities suddenly made you a locker room cancer. As if having standards made you a diva. But the moment the world heard his actual words, all that manufactured drama evaporated. What you saw was calm, measured, assertive, but not disrespectful. The kind of answer that any team should want from a young leader. And suddenly, the same critics who dogpiled him are now sprinting to reframe the narrative. Oh, well, maybe he just got misunderstood. Maybe he was just being honest, and teams weren't ready for it. No, don't do that. Don't pretend you didn't try to bury this kid with secondhand gossip, because that's the point. This entire situation shows how fragile a player's draft stock can be when the wrong narrative takes root. And let's call it what it is. The NFL draft is often less about facts and more about vibes. One scout says you rubbed him the wrong way. That echo travels. One exec thinks you're too outspoken. Suddenly, you've got a label. And it doesn't matter how many touchdowns you threw or how many teammates praise your leadership. You become the problem. Shedeur wasn't the first to get labeled like this. And he won't be the last. Remember Lamar Jackson? Too raw. Cam Newton? Not a leader. Baker Mayfield? Too outspoken. Josh Rosen? Too smart for his own good. Justin Fields? Can't read defenses. The list goes on. And now Shedeur gets added to the pile until he starts breaking every expectation thrown his way, which he's already doing. And here's what's really got people shook. If he keeps rising in Cleveland, if he becomes that guy, this interview leak becomes a moment that changes his narrative forever. It flips the story. It rewrites the first chapter. It says, no, you didn't draft a problem. You drafted a truth teller. You drafted a leader. And that scares people because it forces accountability, not just from the media, but from the scouts, the coaches, the GMs who let a top-tier quarterback slide because he didn't say what they wanted to hear. And now that we've seen the tape, we all see what really happened. Let's talk about the psychological side of this, because Shedeur's composure in that interview wasn't just impressive. It was rare. Most prospects walk into draft interviews like it's a job audition for their life, which, let's be honest, it kind of is. They say what they've been trained to say. They smile when they don't mean it. They downplay their personalities, their boundaries, their goals. But Shedeur, he walked in with clarity, confidence, boundaries, and he made it clear, I'm not going to sell you a lie. And that kind of mental fortitude, that's quarterback DNA. It's the same kind of mental toughness you need in the huddle with 70,000 fans screaming. The same kind that keeps you calm down 14 in the fourth quarter. The same kind that lets you bounce back from a bad throw or a brutal sack without losing your edge. The interview tape didn't expose a flaw. It exposed a strength. A young man who understands the business, understands himself, and doesn't need to shrink to fit a box. And isn't that what leadership is? But here's the dark truth. The NFL doesn't always reward that. The league says it wants leaders, but it often prefers quiet soldiers. They want QBs who follow the script, not ones who edit it. And Shedeur, he's an editor. And now the world is seeing that he wasn't being difficult. He was just being different. And that difference might just be exactly what the Browns need. Let's be real. Shedeur landing in Cleveland might be the best worst-case scenario in NFL draft history. Because had he gone in the first round to a team obsessed with structure and old-school expectations, maybe he gets boxed in. Maybe he gets told to sit, to wait, to learn quietly until someone else says he's ready. But in Cleveland, chaos is the status quo. Expectations are low. Desperation is high. And that means opportunity. And he's already capitalized on it. He's turning heads at OTAs, leading drills, winning over coaches, commanding attention. The kid who got slammed for being too bold in an interview is now the one holding the Browns' offense together in practice. You love to see it. And the fans? They're noticing. They're watching this all unfold in real time, and you can feel the mood shift. Not just excitement, but vindication. Because Cleveland has seen the NFL chew up and spit out too many quarterbacks. They've lived through busts and broken promises. They're done with the PR-friendly letdowns. Now they want real. And Shedeur? He's real. No filter. No facade. No fake humility. Just hard work, self-awareness, and belief. And if you're a Browns fan, that's what you cling to. That's the identity you build around. Not another safe pick, but a fearless one. So let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The Giants leaked the tape, probably hoping to control the fallout, maybe to save face, maybe to shift the narrative back in their favor. But what they actually did was prove Shedeur right. They showed the world that their issue wasn't with his character. It was with his confidence. They didn't like how clearly he saw the situation. They didn't like how directly he called it out. And that's on them. Because you don't punish honesty and then pretend it was immaturity. You don't draft personalities. You draft players. And the Browns might have just pulled off the steal of the decade. Not because Shedeur's perfect. Not because he said all the right things. But because when it counted, when everyone else expected him to fold, he didn't. He stood on what he believed. He faced the fire and came out standing taller. And that's how leaders are made. So what's next? The tape is out. The critics are spinning. The season's inching closer. And Shedeur Sanders? He's just getting started. Every snap he takes in Cleveland is going to be watched with a magnifying glass now. Not just by fans, but by every team that passed on him. every analyst who doubted him, every executive who thought confidence was a red flag instead of a green light. And if he keeps trending the way he's been trending, he's not just going to prove people wrong. He's going to change how quarterbacks are evaluated entirely. Because Shedeur Sanders didn't fit the mold. He broke it. And in doing so, he might have just shown a new path for every young player come behind him who dares to speak honestly, stand firm, and bet on their own ability. So stay tuned, because this isn't just a comeback story. It's a revolution in real time. And Shedeur Sanders, he's not done rewriting the rules. Not even close. Now that the tapes are out and the air has been cleared, or at least blasted wide open, there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. The world has seen the truth. The attitude issues myth, crushed. The idea that Shedeur Sanders bombed the Giants interview, disproven on camera. All that's left now is the fallout. And no, there'll be fallout. Let's start with the most obvious. Every team that passed on him now has to live with it. Every scout, GM, and coach who made the call to move on, to trust anonymous whispers over raw data and visible leadership, now has to watch him start in Cleveland and potentially thrive. Imagine being a front office executive who crossed him off the board over that interview. Imagine watching him win the starting job in camp. Lead a team that's been quarterback star for decades and prove every lazy narrative wrong, week after week. That's not just a mistake. That's a career-defining error. It's a front office indictment. And it's the kind of thing that stays in your reputation file forever. This situation, it's become bigger than a player versus franchise story. It's a referendum on how we evaluate young quarterbacks in the NFL. And now that Shedeur's side of the story is out there, people are starting to rethink the whole system. Because of a young black quarterback who's respectful, intelligent, confident, and honest can still get labeled a problem just for speaking his mind in a high-pressure setting, then the problem isn't with him. It's with the system. It's with the idea that confidence needs to be filtered. That honesty is a liability. That players should smile, nod, and blend in, even when they're built to stand out. Shedeur wasn't trying to win a popularity contest. He was trying to be real, and that scared people. But here's the twist. Now that the real version of that moment is public, people aren't scared anymore. They're inspired. Go look at the fan reactions. Twitter, Instagram, comment sections are full of people saying, "Wait, this was a red flag?" Fans are watching that footage and seeing leadership, integrity, strength under pressure. Because here's what doesn't lie: body language, energy, authenticity. Shedeur didn't try to be flashy in that room. He didn't try to outsmart the panel. He simply answered with clarity, calmly, without pretension. He owned the moment, and now the moment has come full circle. Because he's not just proving he can handle an NFL locker room. He's showing he can command one. That's a massive distinction. And one most rookies don't touch until year 2 or 3, if they ever get there. But Shedeur, he showed it before he was even drafted. And now, with this interview leak, he's proving it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a moment of attitude. It was a glimpse into a quarterback who understands his value, his role, and the politics that surround him. And speaking of politics, let's not dance around it. There's a reason this narrative stuck so easily in the first place. And it has everything to do with who Shedeur is and who he's related to. Let's talk about the Deion factor. Being Coach Prime's son, it's a blessing and a curse. Yes, it gave Shedeur opportunities, but it also made him a walking headline from the jump. Every step of his career has come with baggage, assumptions, and judgment. People assume he's privileged, that he didn't have to earn anything, that he's only in the spotlight because of his last name. But what they forget, or conveniently ignore, is that he outperformed expectations at every level. Not just as a quarterback, but as a leader. He didn't just ride the wave of his father's name. He carved his own path. Quietly, consistently, and under scrutiny that most college quarterbacks couldn't dream of handling. And NFL, they weren't ready for that kind of duality. They saw the name and assumed flash, swagger, arrogance. What they got was discipline, focus, and a young man who understood the business better than they did. The Giants interview, that was the test. Not for Shedeur, but for the system. And the system failed. It took a fifth-round flyer for one of the most poised rookies in the class to finally get a shot. And even then, people were quick to doubt, until the tape dropped. Now, the people who doubted him, they're scrambling for a new angle. They're pretending they always saw the potential, or that maybe he needed the right team all along. No, you didn't believe in him because you couldn't box him in. You didn't understand him. And rather than admit that, you defaulted to the safest narrative. He's too much. Too much personality. Too much confidence. Too much truth. But now, Shedeur is too much to ignore. And in Cleveland, he's becoming exactly what the city didn't know it needed. A new voice. A new face. A quarterback who's not afraid of the noise, because he's lived in it for years. A player who isn't trying to survive the spotlight. He owns it. Let's make something else clear. Shedeur isn't going to be perfect. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to take sacks. He's going to have rookie mistakes. All the same growing pains any young QB faces. But here's the difference. He'll grow through it publicly without fear, because that interview tape, that wasn't a kid folding under pressure. That was a preview of how he handles the tough stuff. Head up, eyes forward, calm in the storm. And if that's how he handles off-field adversity, imagine what he'll be like in a fourth-quarter drive with 2 minutes on the clock and a chance to win. That's what people are starting to realize. The guy who got painted as a diva might actually be the most composed rookie QB in the league. And while the Giants are left explaining why they passed and other teams fumble over excuses, the Browns are suddenly looking like the smartest team in the room. Not because they saw something no one else saw, but because they ignored the noise. They didn't buy the spin. They watched the tape, talked to the player, evaluated the facts, and they walked away with a quarterback, not just a good thrower, not just a mobile athlete, but a quarterback, one who walks into the building like he belongs, one who takes the weight of a franchise and doesn't flinch, one who doesn't need to fake humility because he's too busy proving it every day in practice. That's rare. That's valuable. And that's what teams missed. So now we watch. We watch as Shedeur steps onto the field with a point to prove. Not to the fans, not to his teammates, but to the entire machine that tried to reduce him to a bad interview and a last name. We watch to see how many GMs flinch every time he throws a touchdown. How many pundits rewrite their takes as he stacks wins. How long it takes before people admit they got this entire narrative wrong. And we remember this moment. The moment the tape dropped. The moment the mask came off the process. The moment Shedeur Sanders went from misunderstood prospect to validated leader. This is more than redemption. This is proof that truth still matters, even in a world built on sound bites. And for Shedeur, it's just another step forward. No apologies, no retractions, no limits, only work, only wins, only the future. Because now everyone's watching, and the real Shedeur Sanders is just getting started. Let us know in the comments. Did the Giants just accidentally redeem Shedeur's entire draft story? Should more teams be forced to release interview footage for accountability? And how do we fix a scouting process that still lets reputation outrun reality? And if you're here for the real story, not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next time someone flips the NFL script, you definitely want to be subscribed.